Hey team, how are you? And welcome to the experience with Rehman Cee. And we're going to be talking to Dr. Kim Diramo today about basically her life story. And what we're going to be doing is kind of having a gentle conversation on everything from health, mind, body, consciousness. So I'm going to invite Kim on now, and we'll have a chat. So let's see how it goes. So we've just put the request in, and it seems to be there. Hey, Kim, how are
Hi,
you?
how are you? I'm great. This is it worked easy, so here we are.
Yeah, excellent. Listen, well, thank you so much for coming on the experience with Rehman Cee. Um, Now, you're based in Arizona, is that right?
I'm actually in Colorado, but pretty close to Arizona. I'm in Durango, which is the
Okay.
southwest corner of
Yeah.
Colorado.
I mean, I've been there. In fact, I've been to Telluride. It's one of my favorite places.
Yeah, we're just a couple hours from Telluride. We went there last weekend and we love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I actually went, there's a mountain between Telluride and Durango, and I went up it and I got stuck. So that's my memories of Durango and Telluride.
Were you stuck on skis or
No,
like,
stuck in my car. My four-wheel drive got
oh, no, that's not
stuck at the
fun.
top of the peak on the snow. So that was interesting. Uh, so thanks for coming on board, and I'm gonna get straight into it. So my first question to you is, what's your message to the world?
My message to the world is that we are infinitely powerful. We have the capacity to access unthinkable possibilities. And as a doctor, most doctors are trained to see the body as just physical and to treat it just purely physically. And being highly intuitive, empathic, sensitive, there's a lot more awareness I've had of what else is possible and what we really are. We're energetic, we're vibrational. And it's pretty crazy when you've seen the body as like purely physical and you think, I have a physical problem, I need a physical solution, to begin to see like, whoa, there's way more possible here. Especially when we begin to witness how our body affects others, like our kids or our spouse, or for me, my patients, my clients, the people I work with. Not only in physical proximity to me, but at a distance, like non-locally, because as energy, our bodies are not like just in one physical space. We actually emit an electromagnetic field that we can detect up to 10 feet away from the body, but which has been shown to have effect far, far beyond that. And it explains a lot of what we've seen with non-local healing or even just non-local communication, where you think of somebody and then they call you exactly that time, or something synchronous happens in your life and you're like, how did you know? We're not really separate physical beings. We are very much more expansive than that. So I guess my message is that we have access to unthinkable power, and that when we can allow it in, it can heal the body. I've seen every disease imaginable, especially people with really chronic kind of these like conundrum diagnoses where conventional medicine doesn't really have much to offer, have profound healing when they're willing to access this power. So it affects us in every way, in every aspect of our lives.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So tell me, uh, we're gonna break down your kind of your technical skill set, but I want to kind of understand the person as well. So um, tell me, Kim, like what, how were you raised? What were your parents like? Um, what was their parenting style? Are you the eldest child? Usually the doctors are. How's that all work?
I was the middle, always thought outside the box. I was definitely like a conundrum to my mom. She was like, what are you doing? How are you thinking? How do you know this? And it was like a little bit of, she used to say, you're an enigma. And I don't think she had words for it, but on some level, she understood that I was highly empathic. I could intuit what others were feeling or thinking. I was raised in Boston, and that's a pretty conventional place. I mean, I'm Durango, Colorado. Most people around me are kind of on the same channel I'm on, with being pretty awakened and aware of, that we're not just a physical body, or we're not who we think we are. In Boston, it was like what you see is what you get. And my grandfather was a conventional doctor, and I think that lent a lot into this idea of, you just listen, do what you're told. What do they tell you to do? Let someone else tell you what's going on, and listen to them and comply. And also this like worshiping the doctor, like the doctor's always right, and this is the rule. And my insight was like, whoa, most conventional medicine is way off the mark in how they understand the way the body works. So I actually felt inspired to become a doctor, to share this message from that standpoint in a much different way from what I knew. So, I was raised kind of Catholic, I guess, like sort of Catholic, where it was like Christmas, Easter, or, you go to church, but it wasn't like a super uber religious family, but definitely one where there wasn't a lot of spiritual understanding or spiritual nurturance or support. So when I had, my awakening experience, I was like 16 years old and smoked weed with my boyfriend, and literally like all the intuitive awareness I'd had opened up times 100, and I could hear people think. I could know what was about to happen before it happened. It was actually really freaky and really spooky. Not a pleasant experience, but one that changed me forever, where I began to know undoubtedly that we are not separate and we are not just physical. So that really shaped the course of my life. And even though I had to kind of stay in the closet with it for a very long time, even after becoming a doctor, it was always there as part of what I knew I was here to be, and part of what I knew I was here to share were these like deeper insights that I had about how the body works, what disease really is. That's not a physical thing. That's like the static thing. We need to use medications. What's really going on, and how we can allow and ignite true healing in a much higher way than what is usually being practiced so far. So I love my family. We're really close. They're actually pretty supportive of what I'm doing, even though I don't know if everyone kind of really gets it. They're pretty open, and it's been awesome to have that, because I didn't feel supported as a teen. I felt like, where's my world? Where are my people? So when I had that crazy awakening experience, it was like, we got to take you to the doctor, and we got to medicate you, and we got to lock you up, because what are you going to do to yourself, and who are you? It took a while. It took about 10 years to really integrate that spiritual understanding in a way that didn't feel really scary and really crazy, and to let myself function as an intuitive more seamlessly and harmoniously, instead of like, whoa, this is weird, let me just suppress it and deny it and try to fly under the radar.
Yeah. So do you take more after your mum or your dad? Was your father a doctor as well?
Yeah, my dad's an oral surgeon, had a really successful practice till just like a year or two ago. And he's I think he's like 78 now. So he stuck with it for a long time. He's super academic, which, even though I am a physician, and I went to one of the top emergency medicine programs in the country at Emory University. I actually was never super academic. It was kind of like I did that because I knew this was part of my journey, rather than like, this is my nature. I'm super interested in like the latest research of conventional medicine. And he really was into it. That was his whole life. And I worked for him when I was younger, and I saw these like medical student, dental students come through, and I never thought that I could do something like that. But some of them were just normal people like me. Some of them I could tell like, this is kind of an ordinary person. If he could do it, I could do it. So I started to be inspired to like really move forward in a career in medicine, which ultimately is a big part of what I've done in my life. But I think I'm a lot more like my mom, personality wise. She's super charismatic, has a really powerful life force. Like, you can feel her. across the room. You could, if she walks in the house, you know she walked in the house. Like really, really powerful, and very, very good socially. Like they're opposite. My dad's more like bookworm, really awkward socially, and my mom is like the queen.
Yeah.
Really likable. And I think the one thing I really do have from her is that ability to connect with people in a really powerful way, very, very quickly.
So, how would you describe her energy? And then, if we are energy and she's of that energy, how is the energy of your father then? Does he have
His
energy?
his energy is a lot more suppressive. He was in a really abusive situation with his family, physically, like some anger and hostility and manipulation and just kind of strange parenting. And that made him a really angry, like there was a rage way deep in there, but it didn't come out unless triggered. So it was like living from here up, where you're like, everything's good, everything's very pleasant, life is just fine, let's keep things pleasant, but like couldn't really go beneath the surface, or it was like a mess.
Right.
And I think we all have that to a degree, where we were trained to like project this persona, and then like, wait, what's really swimming underneath here? How deep can I go before, you know, it's not, it's the stuff that's not owned and not conscious. And so for him, it's a lot less of like authentic person showing up, and a lot more of talking head, super sweet, very, very sweet on that level. And he was always really generous with us, like educated us, or we did, you know, trips and things, but there's not as much that you can really feel who's in there, you know, who's this person really. And with my mom, you know, she's a lot more willing, whether it's messy and it's like rah, 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 you know, she's very alive, and there's less of suppression. So that's the difference. And they both, you know, we are energy, but my dad's a lot more like kind of all shut down in here. You really can barely feel anything. And it's funny, no one's ever asked me about this in an interview. And my mom is, you cannot, like, if you, people will say, oh, I don't know if I've ever met her. You're like, well, you haven't met her because you wouldn't miss her. And she's really a lot more of presence.
So, how did they meet then, with such opposite characteristics?
She grew up in a family where her dad was a doctor and her mom was the, and I'm going to quote, the doctor's wife, because that was like a thing and it was a role, and somehow like that was what my mom aspired to be. So she was raised in like, I guess 50s, 60s. Yeah, 50s and 60s. And you know, if you ever saw the movie Grease, which I loved when I was a kid, I got a really good sense of what that culture was like when I watched it with my daughter as an adult. I'm thinking, fun musical, I love the songs. But when I watched it with her, I was like, we have to turn this off, because it was all about like women are only good for one thing, and really bashing a lot of like gender roles and bashing of women, and you know, men are supposed to be this way and it's all about being cool. But it was like, well, this isn't just a spoof, this is how the culture really was. And it helped me understand, growing up with a mother who sexuality was not discussed. If it ever came up, it was all about keep your legs crossed. That was it, period. Men were, you know, it's like men are good for one thing only, right? They're going to go out and they're going to provide. So it wasn't a lot of depth of understanding like relationship or connection. And so I didn't realize, I was pissed at her about that for so long. Like, you never talked to me about sex, about my period. Like, how come this is completely left off the table? And it's like probably the most important thing. But I understood after I saw that movie again, I was like, you know what? This is what she was raised with. Like, that's the programming. So I think for her, go and find a great provider. And having had a dad that she sort of worshiped, who was the doctor, and then the mom who was in this role that she really admired, that was what she saw that she wanted to create in her life. And essentially that's what she chose. But because she wasn't using her full awareness to like feel my dad and know like, this is not the right energy for me, she chose from her head, you know, from here up, looks good, smells good, yep, this is what we're going to do. So, you know, they married and had a pretty superficial relationship with a lot of drama and turmoil and, you know, pain and limitation. And they ended up in divorce when I was in medical school. And it was a great relief. She's gone on to live a really happy life and do the things she really enjoys. And he's actually gone on to live the happiest life I think that could possibly be available for him. And he's much, you know, they're in a different space, each of them, and more free as a result. But I think that's why that marriage came about. Everyone who knows them is like, I can't imagine in a million years that these guys were married. But if you go back to that 50s and 60s mindset, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so now your elder sibling, they became a doctor as well?
No, my sister is a homemaker and a tennis coach, and she has 3 adult children. She started when they were much younger. I'm only a year younger than her, but I started so much older. So like her kids are babysitting my kids, and my kids are little. And then my brother is a lawyer. He's younger, and they both live in Boston and very close to where we grew up. And, you know, he's still single, but has a really sweet girlfriend.
Yeah. So what's the psychology of living in a generational doctor's family? How is that different to perhaps, you know, a regular, you know, if there's any such thing as regular family?
Meaning that my dad was a doctor and my
Yeah,
grandfather.
your grandfather was a doctor, your dad was a doctor.
Okay, I'm going to honestly say I think it would be very different if I were male. Because I really kind of like left that conventional career as an emergency medicine doctor. So I'm not in the identity of I'm this doctor and this thing with the white coat and here's what I do in this context that you already understand. And B, being a woman in the context of my family, it's not your identity to the same degree. Like, oh, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you're a da-da-da. And I'm not saying this as like a negative in my family. I'm just like, they don't identify you in your career the same way, because it's like, well, you're going to get married and have kids. Oh, you do this doctor thing too. Well, but you're going to be married and have kids. So it was never like an identity or an expectation in a good way of like, you're going to be this thing and you're going to do that. So in that way, it was like a lot easier for me to step out of it and do what I'm doing now, which is like an international practice of mind, body medicine and self-healing. Kind of seamlessly. It wasn't like when my husband stepped out of his conventional career as a radiologist, it was actually more upsetting to my mom. Well, doesn't he miss it? Shouldn't he be doing that? I mean, he's so good treating patients. He should be doing this. And he's actually an entrepreneur who has way bigger aspirations that model didn't have space for. And he knew this earlier on, so kind of like branched out. But that was actually more disruptive in my family than me having a complete transition in my career. Was like nobody said a thing. It was an afterthought.
Yeah. So so what is your identity now?
I will say quite honestly that, okay, and most people, if you're empathic or highly sensitive, you come to this at some point or another, that to move into the infinite self, I'm a spiritual being, having a physical experience, feels so much lighter when, you know, here I am in my body. I'm aware of what's going on. I'm in 10 different dimensions. I can perceive people's emotions, thoughts. I know where they're functioning from. If someone's sick, I know exactly why they're sick and their body's not healing. If someone's not making money, I know exactly what's keeping that lack pattern in place. I can let myself have that awareness. But if I were functioning from identity, meaning I'm a woman, I'm 40 whatever years old, I'm a doctor, it feels so contracted that it's like physically painful. Interestingly, this is where a lot of people develop disease from. That's an aside point. So to identify less with roles or characteristics or attributes, it's like a natural way. Like it's so much lighter that you naturally move toward that, I'd say year by year by year. So I've thankfully stepped out of a lot of that identities. Like, for example, oh, well, I'm a doctor, so I shouldn't say that. Or, well, I'm this, so I shouldn't do that. what's actually organic for me? Who am I going to show up as? What am I going to say? I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. But if I stay in a space of love and serenity, it will be a contribution. It will be harmonic. It'll be authentic. It'll actually move the freaking mountain. When I'm in a session with someone, very powerful things happen for them in their body. It's not me. It's not my identity. It's not, let me think about this and say that. So then this happens. That was, I think, how a lot of doctors function in conclusion. But it just, you literally, like I said, it's pain if you try to function that way, or like fit in. When I would try to fit into the world, like, geez, why can't I just be a normal ER doctor and make a living and do this and like get through the rest of my life because this is painful? No, that's not what's in store for you. It's not going to work. You have to step into something more expansive. So I'd say getting more comfortable with the unknown and letting go of attachment. Okay. That's been the path.
But it's an interesting concept, the idea of consciousness. And then if you have consciousness and your energy, doesn't that energy, like you're a spiritual being in a physical body, so you're an energy, doesn't that energy seek to express in some way? And I'm trying to understand what that expression as an identity is.
Yes, the energy physicalizes.
Right.
And so my expression, you know, joy is my major guide. I know if I focus on joy, everything takes care of itself. Is this joyful for me? Where I'm creating the materials to share about my practitioner program that's starting in September. We do it every year. And I know where I used to create was from conclusion. I got to say this, I got to do that, I got to make sure. And now it's like, what's joyful for me? What's organic for me? So I'll create, you know, the emails or the workshop that we're doing and honor, Kim, what's joyful for you? That's like the home base. Instead of like identity, what should I say? What do they, you know, what do they want to hear? Like that isn't how I operate anymore. So it feels a lot more fluid for me. So I would say if I center in joy, I wouldn't call it identity, but that's the guiding that always allows, you know, health in my body, prosperity in my work and my creation, harmony in my relationship, because I have a husband and that's a very intense relationship. And it really creates a lot of ease in the home. We have 2 kids, and you know, you can imagine that it could be a lot if you're like, I have to eat only organic and only vegetarian because I know that's the healthiest thing. Like I could make my whole life be really, really hard work.
Okay. So tell me your journey from 16 to now. What's that journey been?
I had the awareness that I was here to serve a very powerful message, specifically in the field of medicine about health and healing. I had no idea how that was going to happen, but I had the download of like me with the cap and gown, graduating, standing on some kind of podium and being honored. Like, Kim, you're going to go in that direction. And the thoughts I had were like, how the heck am I going to do that? I wasn't, like I said, it wasn't super academic. School wasn't that important to me because I was like, I'm not buying into this. But literally at that moment on, I was like hyper vigilant about studying, learning, passing the mark, because it was part of the journey I had of like, this is the path I've got to go and get these seals of approval to get in, you know, graduate high school, get into a good college, go to medical school and, you know, become a doctor. And I always knew. So when I did that, I studied osteopathic medicine, did a fellowship in that as well, about how the body heals itself. I was super interested in that. Like from that moment forward at 16, I read everything I could get my hands on. I was about mind body medicine. I was introduced to Joan Borysenko, who was a PhD at Harvard, who really was a founder of mind body medicine and the science behind how the mind affects the body, how the body heals itself. And I went with my dad to the Yankee Dental Conference, which is like the biggest international dental event of the year. And he would speak at it every year. And so we went and saw him speak and went to some of the exhibits. And I saw Joan Borysenko speak, and it changed my life forever. Because what she was saying was the science of what I was aware of in my body. and that download, you know, at 16, and that awakening and all the stuff being revealed to me about the body and healing and what's really going on. She was speaking about the science and the research and the discoveries, and I was blown away. And I started reading books on this and putting my time into, I was always punished, so I had to stay home because I would like take the car out for a ride and be really rebellious and just want freedom, get me out of here. Then it actually got me more locked in. So I remember that summer mostly being home and reading these books and just contemplating, what is this power? What's this power in me? So I knew that the course, on some level, like, this is where you're going. This is what you're going to do in the world. It didn't make any sense, but each year by year, you know, this is what's come together. And then even as a practicing doctor, there I was in the ER practicing full time at a, you know, pretty intense emergency center in the inner city of Atlanta. And I was like, please, God, get me out of here. Where's my real life? What's the next step? This is not where I meant to stay. I feel stuck. I feel like I had all this inspiration and now this is my real life. So it was maybe 2.5 years in when I started to just feel like, come on. And the message always was, be anxious for nothing. It will come to you. And this went on for, I don't know, months, maybe a year, but certainly months, where I would just go out in the veranda in the middle of a shift and be like, oh my God, this is not my life. I can't do this. And it was like, be anxious for nothing. It will come to you. And I finally spoke with one of my colleagues who also did the osteopathic fellowship with me, but she went on to practice osteopathic medicine, self-healing, mind-body connection. And I felt so jealous of her because I knew that wasn't my path. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I went into emergency medicine for a reason. But in that moment, I was like, why did I do this? And she told me that this one mentor that we'd had, who had a very successful practice in Maine, moved to Tennessee to help start a new medical school. And I was like, Tennessee, that's not far from me. I want to get involved. I got to get in touch with him. And a couple days later, I got a call from Greg, and he said, what do we got to do to get you here? He wanted me to come and teach. I'd had a lot of teaching experience. He said, let's do this. I found out it's in the middle of nowhere, in like the rural Tennessee. And it was 5 hours from Atlanta. Not, I'm going to just go up once in a while. Like, I'm going to have to sell my home, move, leave all my friends, and move to the middle of nowhere. But the yes was so profound. I can't describe it. It was like the voice of God, like, ah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And very shortly thereafter, I moved there and really mentored with him. He's been a huge factor in my life. Dr. Greg Thompson taught 3 groups of medical students coming through the osteopathic school. Started a clinic with Greg and worked in the ER locally, just kind of an aside. And I felt so much more momentum in my life and so much more of like alignment. I'm on my path. I still knew there was something more expansive for me to create in my work, because it wasn't about fix my knee, fix my hip, fix my headache. The work I was here to do was much more profound. I had no idea what it looked like, but I did, like I said, keep my awareness on that true north and that inspiration I'd had way back. And eventually, you know, started teaching courses about empowerment and awakening and how that affects your health and your physical body. And then we took those courses online, and then I learned, like, how do I function in an online business, and had a little bit of a rocky road with that, because there's a lot of marketing hype out there about what you need to do. You got to do this, you got to do that kind of like got me off my center, but was able to regain center, trust my own wisdom, and really establish something very powerful, where I'm assisting others in their own awakening for health.
Yeah, interesting. So how did you meet your guy?
My guy? Okay, this is a whole other story, but I had a pretty rocky road with relationships, not really having been taught how to know myself, how to honor myself, how to cherish my own, you know, being, who am I really, versus like, oh, that looks good, let me make this work. I loved relationship. I love connection. I had a lot of really beautiful, amazing relationships, but because I didn't really center in what was most important to me, I kind of left myself out of the equation of those relationships. So after like a divorce and then
What
another
does that mean?
really,
Leave yourself out of the
you know,
equation.
like, is this really for me? Is this really a fit for me? Is this person have the values that are what are most important to me of the kind of person they are, or what kind of life we want to create together, what's most important. And in my marriage, I realized like, this isn't a fit. There's no way. And I worked so hard because I really did not believe in divorce. You know, I believe in love. And so I felt like, oh, the more I believe in love, the more I'll give, the more I'll forgive, the more I'll accept. But it just got me further and further down a hole of like betraying myself and leaving myself out of the equation, meaning it wasn't really what was important to me. It wasn't really what I wanted to create in my life. So yeah, so I had to realize like that sometimes honoring yourself means leaving. And the more I connected again, it was joy. I had just finished residency. I finally gave myself the, I guess, pat on the back of like, Kim, I'm proud of you. You've done great. Don't make life an uphill battle. You don't need to prove yourself. Because I think I had to prove myself to myself. I'm a valid person. I'm willing to work hard. I can do it. But that was kind of out of a sense of inadequacy. And so I got myself off the hook after residency. It was a really, really challenging residency program. But the most challenging thing about it was trying to hold my marriage together at that time. And I realized, like, you know what, Kim, let go and let God. Take your hands off the wheel and go with the flow of where life's bringing you. And as soon as I did that, the whole marriage dissolved. The abuse became kind of overt instead of like covert and subtle. And I realized, like, I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm clear. So I still hadn't really learned that, who am I and how to really honor myself fully in the relationship. But I learned, I had really wonderful guys in my life that, you learn a lot in relationships if you're willing to. And after another really deep love relationship fell apart, and I can't even describe the level of devastation, the pain I had to meet. It's unthinkable. Like with every breath, just to breathe was so painful. Like you want to shut down. You want to shut down and not feel and just whatever, carry on. And I think a lot of people do to some degree when there's grief. You distract yourself with work. You distract yourself with staying busy and suppressing. And that's okay in small doses, but you've got to revisit this because you can't be fully alive if you suppress what you really feel. So I just remember crying in yoga class, like just taking a breath was so painful, let alone moving. But it changed me forever because I realized the one constant in all of my painful relationships was me. I couldn't make this guy wrong. I could have made him wrong 80 different ways. And I really do love him still. We still love each other and we're friends. We keep in touch. But because I decided to choose love instead of like making him wrong and he's the bad guy and that's why this happened to me, to protect myself from feeling the grief, I was able to keep my heart open and love me and love him and like really face it. And that opened me to the awareness of all the things I was doing that were like abusing myself, all the things I was doing that were I'm betraying myself to choose a guy who's not a fit and try to make it work and then make him wrong. It's like, what's your game, Kim? Because I finally was committed to having big love and a marriage and family and commitment, and that I really knew that I wanted that. Because I was so committed, I was willing to meet that depth of seriously freaking mind-blowing pain and meet myself. And it was actually a pretty short time after that I met my husband, who's a gift. He's a gift. He's not perfect. It's every relationship you meet yourself more fully of like, where do you get pissed off or where do you get and you do a withhold. So it's not always comfortable. but I always choose love because I knew like I really want that in my life. I'm committed to that. So he's a guy who's willing to show up as fully in love as I am. And that was really the only factor. That's the most important factor. And all the other pieces are aligned.
Yeah. So what is love?
It's indescribable because as soon as we talk about what it is, we talk about the feeling or we talk about the energy. Love is a frequency. Um, Love is guiding me into truth. So I would say love is to open my heart and live fully with what is. And what is could feel like shit. What is could feel like hate. What is could feel really fiery and anger. I mean, I don't know what is. What's coming up in my body right now is what is. And if I can embrace it, the energy moves through and it's a beautiful experience. To meet that depth is full aliveness. I used to think to be fully alive, I would always feel good. But I know now that to be fully alive is to always feel life. And if I remember that life is beautiful and I receive it, it truly is fluid and it is an amazing experience. But the mind would judge the heck out of it and make it good and bad and try to make everything good. And that's just repression. That's not life. And that's exactly what I've seen create disease in the body for myself personally as well, an autoimmune disease. And I have learned, if you're empathic and you're highly sensitive, you pay attention and you can learn really fast because you're like, oh my God, it's so intense. I'm not going to miss this. It's not subtle. So I think that's been a real gift, even though for many years it felt like a curse. I would say love is experiencing life fully.
Right. But within the context of this relationship, you're saying he's not perfect, but you found the right one. He's the guy. So what was the difference in experience of love
His
previously
willingness
to this one?
to show up for himself and not stay in suppression where he's like, what are you talking about? Everything's fine. And like living from here up. And then I don't really feel partnered because I'm like, hey, there's so much more. Let's jump in. And I think a lot of people, we want to hide because it's really scary to live fully. But I think for me, the match was someone who is willing to live with integrity to who they really are, to let themselves be seen and share who they are so I can feel them, to honor their own passions and truths, like someone who would have said, oh no, I can't leave medicine because this is what I have to do, and not listen to his own heart to go out and become an entrepreneur and do things very differently. Let's live full out. Let's explore that. I've supported him in that, where, a couple years of he wasn't producing income. He was growing a business that was like maybe gonna be something amazing and maybe not. But we both knew like this was a yes and we're gonna explore this. And he learned so much along the way about himself and of course about business. And he has absolutely created a spectacularly successful, very business that really contributes. I think the biggest thing though that was that he was willing to live fully and say yes to his yes and be who he really is, so that it brings us both more alive when we do.
Yeah. So like, if I understand that he's done the deep work, he's willing to be vulnerable and then express that vulnerability.
Yeah, and he still does it because
Okay.
it's not a destination, which we always get a little bummed about because everyone's like, haven't I gotten there? But then once you get over that, you're like, oh, this is the journey is always going to be ever expanding. And yeah, so he still shows up that way. Even when he's grungy, he's willing to let me share. That the other person I was with before, which was like the devastating heartache, what I realized was, and I have my own ownership of how I created that dynamic, but he wasn't really willing to let me see his journey or his pain or his fear. He was also an entrepreneur and it was a pretty rocky road, but I was clueless because I'm like, you want me to think you're my hero and everything's great. And he was trying to pull it off like everything's perfect. So I didn't know I couldn't really connect with him
Right.
because, and be there for him and partner. And so I was pretty depressed through that relationship. And then he eventually left, like, well, if you're not happy, if I can't make you happy now, how am I going to make you happy with 2 kids down the hall? And I was like, what? This isn't about making me happy. It's like, are we going to show up and connect? And I think that's where a lot of people are, like, it's, you know, you're afraid to let people see you don't have it all together. You are afraid. You feel shame or embarrassment or inadequacy. But freaking, we all do. Like, that's no big deal. Yeah, yes to this. That's what love is, that you say yes and you receive it and you accept instead of, you know, suppress and judge.
Yeah.
So,
So he's an empath as well, like you?
he's pretty intelligent emotionally. But not, I don't think I've ever met anybody who's as empathic, maybe one person. So that might be a little bit, I don't want to put that on him.
Okay.
But he's definitely very aware, and he's awake to a significant degree.
Okay. So let's go deep now. Let's go, I know this is pretty deep anyway, but let's go really deep. Tell me what you believe the meaning of life is.
Okay. I want to say this as the preface, because I honestly know that the meaning of life is that there is no meaning. But that's like from the mind. The mind wants to put meaning on everything. Oh, this happened, it must be good. This happened, it must be bad. Everything has meaning. But the mind is what's not real. So in that way, there's no meaning. It's all what is. So once we get that off the table, I have experienced that the meaning of life is to have a forum, a playground in which to express the deepest part of who you are, the deepest expression of who you are, because all of life is reflecting you. And so if life is like, no, doors closed, limitation, lack, not enough money, nobody likes you, you're like, okay, life sucks. But if you realize, like, oh, who am I being that's creating that? It's a mirror. Who am I being that's creating, no one wants to take my program? Who am I being that's created, I got dumped again? Who am I being? How am I showing up? And if I can soften, more of me comes through, the essence of me, the light, the infinite me, the higher me. If I soften, just even physically soften my body, more of me comes through, the light, and my life changes. And what I see is immediately different. People are like, oh, I love you, you're amazing. Or, oh, I get what you're saying, that makes sense. Or, hey, let me give you lots of money. Money can flow. But I've got to soften to let in that essence that I am. You could call it the light, you could call it the higher self, you could call it whatever you want to call it, but it's a simple thing. The only thing that can be lacking is more of me showing up. And if I think from inadequacy, like I used to do, more of me showing up means work harder, do more, try harder. That's just more inadequacy. But if I remember, like, this is what flows through me, not from me, I can soften my shoulders, breathe a little more fully, and let what's coming through come through. And I think the meaning of life, or like the purpose of life, is to teach us to do that, to be that.
Okay. But I'm going to step back a little bit. Like, I get that answer, but do you believe in terms of the universe being random or non-random?
It's both. It's both. It will morph into whatever we create. Just like a cell, you have a liver cell that's cancerous. And now you have it in a different environment that's like nurturing, you know, the cell fluid, the cell environment. That cell is now a healthy cell, vibrant, healthy, right? So the material of the universe is neutral. Oh, anger, fear. Okay, I'm going to show up as a cancerous cell. Okay, yes. Or like, ease, love, joy, I embrace myself fully. That cell's like, okay, I'm going to show up as a vibrant cell. The universe isn't partial. It's all of it. It's all of it. And if I'm in the life is meaningless, it doesn't matter, I'm going to live a random life. But if I find alignment in like I shared, I connect with joy. Life actually shows up in a different way, and the true nature of life is that. So it's not actually random.
Right. So you believe the universe is not random, right? Because like you've talked about alignment and you've talked about energy, all these kind of concepts
I believe the way
presuppose.
we're designed to operate in the universe is not random. I believe we're designed to operate in a space of harmony, and that's what gives us more life. It's what gives the body life. It's what gives the cells life. It's what gives relationship life. And that's the nature of the universe. So
Right.
we say that universe is not random. Okay.
What is consciousness?
So you do a lot of interviews like this because you're pretty good at these questions.
No, I'm just starting, so I appreciate that.
I think the most important thing is to ask why we're asking that question. Because we could have an academic discussion about this for 30 years. And it might be fun and entertaining and keep us occupied, especially for those of us who like, we've opened the crown chakra and we're like, oh, I understand. But it is utterly meaningless unless we're asking for the purpose of living more fully from love. So I would say,
See, but you're describing a model, right? You're already presupposing a model exists, and you attune to that model, and then from that model, you're framing something, and then you're speaking from it. Do you get what I'm saying? So, and I'm just interested in your perspective. So, you know, okay, so you've got love. You would have to tell me what love is from that perspective first of all, and then bringing consciousness into that.
mm-hmm. Consciousness is our awareness of what is. Just the observer. And there's only, the only reason it's worth talking about, like we're having this, you know, conversation, is in the way it helps us awaken to who we are.
Right.
Otherwise, just information.
Right. But to help us awaken, we'd have to understand the mechanics, right?
No. That's the biggest misconception. And one of the biggest things with people who come to my work for healing are in. The thing they need to understand it before they can embrace, embody, and receive it. And that is the number one thing that blocks it. The number one thing that keeps us from having more effortlessly and maybe instantly is the need to understand it first. You can't. Right. You can't. It's not possible, because from the mind and, you know, where we are now, something has to happen before that understanding can come in.
Okay. I mean, there's, you know, spiritual being, physical being, there's movement you got to experience, and then, but also as a spiritual being, you got to understand it intellectually as well. No?
Because that's the thing. What happens in the work I'm doing is people think this, and then, like I said, it could take us 10 or 20 years to get somewhere. But if you could embody it right now, like relax your shoulders and breathe more fully, and the question answers itself. Because it's all from the mind. The mind wants to understand everything. But we actually don't need the mind to heal. We actually don't need the mind to experience life and exist, which is a much bigger statement to make. But if we're trying to attain any of this through the mind, we got a very long haul to nowhere.
So what's the use of the mind?
The mind can be called upon for useful things like calculations or helping us channel awareness. Like if I use my mind to say, what's the best thing for us to do with our afternoon that's going to bring joy to my family? I just change the channel to the information coming into my system. Or if I'm with a patient or a client, what's actually going on that's really behind all of this? And I ask that question, I can know. Or what's one thing I could have her do that could shift everything? And I can know that. I can let that in. So I can use the mind as a tool, but I'm not the mind and I don't need the mind. It's actually, I know we could have an academic chat about this, but it's just a really simple thing that so if we get beyond that, so, everything can be easier.
Right. But what you're telling me is what you're talking about is not the mind. So what is actually the mind?
What I'm talking about as the consciousness is not the mind. The mind is
No,
just
what you're
the
talking about
calculation.
is the processing, the intellectual processing is not the mind. That
Oh no,
is
no,
a,
the intellectual processing is the mind. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but what is
To ask
governing
that
the,
question or make a choice.
but what is governing the experience? You have a
Consciousness.
need to experience, right? Where is that governance coming from for the experience? How is that being dictated?
The consciousness is where we observe the experience. And if we reside in consciousness, which is just pure love, higher self, it's a very simple, pure awareness. There is no mind. There's no thinking. I'm not saying turn off your thoughts or try to not
No, no,
think,
I think there is
but
thinking, but it's in a different modality. And that's what I'm trying to understand. You're
it can
using,
come through the mind. It can come and then we have the perception of it and we have a thought. But in pure perception, it's just bliss.
all right. So we've got about like 10 minutes. Tell me a little bit more about your work.
So my work, similar to what we're talking about, was created from awareness, definitely not my mind, because I would have had no idea how to do this. How do I help somebody heal? Whoa. So so I basically see a lot of people in groups or privately who have had like a conundrum of your health or your experience, like life's not working. I'm sick, I'm not getting better, I can't get out of the wheelchair, I have chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's, autoimmune disease, fibromyalgia, all these things that have kind of ended up being this like no man's land in conventional medicine. Like, I don't even know why, and I don't know what to do. Or Epstein-Barr virus that won't clear no matter how hard we try, Lyme disease. And because I'm functioning in a higher consciousness, we can access a lot more possibilities. Like, what would it take for your body to heal and be well and allow that to come in? Either through like tools we'll use to, you know, adjust your nervous system, connect with your body. Sometimes we use EFT tapping or other tools to communicate with the body. Or sometimes there are other, you know, homeopathics that people are, like one time a woman after severe months and months and months of severe thyroid disease, going to the ER, like nothing was happening. We did this clearing work and the next day she found a homeopathic that completed the whole thing, completely healed and resolved. So it doesn't really matter the tools, it matters how that person is now open to receive what's required. So the work I do, either in the groups or individually, is on that level.
Isn't that what a shaman does?
Maybe on some level. I don't really know that much about shamanism, but I'm sure there's something similar.
Because I almost feel what you're doing is creating, I mean, if you make the assumption that change happens through a signal, then whichever way you want the person to be open and then allow that signal to flow through, to believe, the signal being belief. Do you get what I'm saying?
I would say the change happens through the shift in consciousness, because now the frequency is a higher frequency.
Right. But then once that shift takes place, then the signal is being
Yes,
transmitted
now
from the
your
spiritual
amygdala
to
is
the
functioning
physical.
different. Now your endocrine system's functioning different. Now the physical chemical signals in your body are very different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, so what kind of, healing have you had successes with?
So I
Is
actually
there a
just had a
particular type of
post from
healing that
someone
works
who,
really well with your modality, your
yeah,
practice?
there was a woman today who shared a post. She just got out of her wheelchair with severe chronic fatigue and, you know, neurologic problems that nothing was helping her. They didn't understand what was going on. I've had people with Lyme disease clear, people with Epstein-Barr disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune disease, chronic pain. So like migraines, back pain, neck pain, fibromyalgia. That I would say, even MS, because that kind of falls into the autoimmune category. That's kind of the world of where I say I operate best for people. I would also say though that all of them have reported back major changes in their relationships, because, you know, when you open up to more of yourself in your body, you just can't show up the same way. You're like, you communicate differently, you know, you own what's your part, you soften instead of like hard edge in your relationships. So that's another big thing that people have also with their money, where there's like lack, I never have enough, abundance can flow in. So pretty major changes that happen when people do this work. Even in small ways, like I get, on my YouTube channel, people will be like, oh my God, I watched this video, I don't have pain anymore. Oh my God, I watched this video, I had this huge awakening. So even in a subtle way, something, when you're ready, it can come in.
What's your understanding of the placebo?
I would say that we've seen and proven to ourselves that transmission of consciousness is the foundation of all healing. The placebo effect, we say, hey, you're not going to have migraines anymore. You're going to take this pill. I'm going to give you this thing. And because it's always 100% of the time, what makes the placebo work is the rapport and communication, connection between the doctor and the patient. It's not, oh, you never met me before, here you go. That works, but not to the same degree. What actually activates the placebo is there's, in some way, I'm holding space of, I know there's possibility for you to heal, and I'm assisting that health in expanding. It's not about, let me fix your knee, let me fix your head, let me fix your problem. It's about, I'm inviting you into a higher experience of yourself. We've proven this to ourselves over and over and over, not in subtle ways of like, oh, let's account for this little minute thing going on over here, but here's like the medicine, which is the real thing. No, it's like more significant than any medication we've ever known, more powerful than anything we've ever seen. Why are we not looking at that and cultivating that as the number one healing modality, and then using medications or supplements or other things to assist it? Well, that's what I'm doing. That's all I care about. That is the thing.
Okay, so we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I've got about 4 questions. I'm going to throw them at you very quickly. But before I do that, from a spiritual perspective, what is your opinions of Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna, Moses, Jesus? How do you see these people?
They were sharing this truth in different ways through different channels, that we are connected, that we can access unthinkable, infinite possibilities and power, that we're worthy, that it's within us, that we're not limited, we're not separate, and it's possible. And they invited us to consider that and to allow that. And who do I need to be to live that? They didn't tell us, I'm special, and if you worship me, maybe you'll have a little bit of it. They told us all of this and more, you will do as well. You are this. They showed us the example, and we've turned it into something, I don't know, maybe we weren't ready to realize that we're that powerful. We turned it into something a few degrees off center, but we can come back to that and view it from a deeper awareness, look at it from a deeper space of receptivity.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got 2 minutes left. If you were to describe yourself as an animal, what kind of animal would you describe yourself?
Giraffe.
Giraffe. What 3 qualities do you possess of a giraffe?
I don't possess a long neck, but I love beautiful long neck, something there. I love the elegance of the giraffe and the grace. Okay. How they, they move slowly. They're not going and like attacking the animals. Nothing wrong with that. But that's something that really appeals to me is the grace in the giraffe.
Okay. And they say you're the average of the 5 people that you most hang around with. In a fantasy scenario, so let's assume you had the choice of hanging around with whoever you wanted to, past, present, or future, who would you most hang around with?
There are a lot, but I would just off the top of my head, Abraham Lincoln, Mother Teresa, Jesus Christ. That's 3. And some of this is out of interest as well as like that emanation of consciousness. Gandhi, we could throw into the mix. Oprah Winfrey. There's so many. I don't know if that was really the best selection, but I would go for that.
Okay. So we've got about a minute left or 30 seconds. What's your final message?
You are the medicine. I would say relax into your body and let it reveal itself to you, because it doesn't exist in the mind. And when we try to find the answer, whether it's what's my therapy, where's my guy, we're just creating the resistance we're fighting against. It truly takes, it's the simplest thing, just like Dorothy clicked her heels together. It's all she had to do the whole time is click her heels together. Find that space just by relaxing your shoulders a